In this video, we're going to show you a little bit about how to manipulate cardboard to create a hollow form. Keeping in mind our objective for this assignment is that our composition is supposed to be non-objective, meaning it's not supposed to look like anything, it's not supposed to represent anything, it's just supposed to be form living in our space. So here we have a sphere, a twisted kind of triangle, and a little bit of a abstracted rectangle, but still in their essence they are shapes that have been transformed into form that are now a three-dimensional object. And overall it occupies a large amount of space, so it has a lot of volume. It looks physically heavy, but it's actually super light. It's slightly different on the back. You could say that you could look at this composition also horizontally, but in this orientation it does not occupy the same amount of visual weight, so that's why they ended up using this particular direction for this piece. But keeping that in mind, how would you even take cardboard, a flat, stiff, rigid material, and turn it into something that might look a little bit more organic or a little bit more twisting without having a lot of kinks and visual distractions in the material? So let me show you a few different ways that we can achieve that. Okay. The tools that we need are very simple. One that is in your toolkit is a utility knife, not this one per se, but you have the retractable blade. X-Acto knives and utility knives are actually the most dangerous tool in an art department or in an art class, because it looks like a regular knife and you think it's benign, but actually really simple little mistakes because you keep one hand in the path of the cutting, and accidents happen really quickly. So please be careful with your utility knives. I'll show you a few things to look out for safety with that. Scissors, I hope you have some scissors at home. Sometimes, depending on the cardboard that we're using or the outline or contour that we're trying to cut, sometimes it might be easier to cut with scissors. Ruler, sometimes you might need a straight edge. Masking tape, you supply your own masking tape, but you will need tape of some kind to make a few connections between your different pieces of cardboard. Pen or pencil, whatever marking instrument you want. Remember, the end product is going to be covered in paper mache, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't erase. And I have a screw here. You could use a nail, a pin, anything. I'll show you how we're going to use that in a little bit. Okay. So one thing I want to talk about first is the cardboard itself. When you're thinking of cardboard, you're probably thinking of, you know, a box, a moving box from Home Depot or an Amazon box, and you look at the edge, it's pretty thick. You can kind of see some of the corrugation, the lines in which everything comes together. Sorry, it's not coming up in your video, but if you look at the edge of a piece of cardboard, this side, you can see how it was constructed, and you can see the grain. So with this one, you can see the edges running here, so our grain runs this way. You can kind of see it in the cardboard itself. There's a lot of visual lines running vertically across this piece. So we want to go with the grain. We don't want to cut across it. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take this other piece because I already had that one marked for something else. Again, you can see your lines running this way, so we're going to make our cuts going in the same direction. These are called relief cuts. If you try and take a piece of cardboard and bend it, it's just going to want to give here and there, but it's not going to be smooth. It's going to be kind of bumpy. Right? So it's going to be a visual distraction. So if you have your utility knife and your ruler, here's where I'm talking about. Lots of times we have our ruler and we're holding it and our finger comes slightly past the edge. It's just natural because we're trying to hold down the ruler to the material, but we're not really thinking about what's in the cutting path. So making sure that your fingers are away from the cutting path of the knife. I'm going to cut, but I'm not going to go all the way through. I'm going to lightly score. I'm only going through part of this material. The bottom layer should still be intact. And just by doing this so much, I don't really need a ruler, and I can get through it a little bit quicker, making sure I'm not cutting towards myself. My fingers are out of the way of the path of the blade. I have a series of these relief cuts where some of them could be a little bit deeper, but again, you do not want to go all the way through because then it's going to separate. So it's kind of have to go by feeling, and I can't really show you in the video. You just have to feel how thick the material is and how deep you have to cut. But see, if we do those relief cuts, we can then get a smooth curve, or smoother curve, if you will, rather than trying to take a piece where we didn't make those cuts in. And you can see how if you try and make a curve, it doesn't really want to make a curve. So this curve is kind of how we might have been able to have achieved this surface here. Right, so there has to be some type of relief cuts to allow the material to bend and move. So you could take that piece that we just made and then come back all the way over to the other side, and you can see you could probably have the beginnings of a cylinder. You cut 2 circles, put 1 on each end, and you have a cylinder. Okay. Taking that idea of relief cuts and marking out flat what your shape would look like unfolded. So this would be a cube, 6 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now I need to make a through cut, and talking about work surfaces here for a minute, I have a piece of scrap plywood underneath this. You do not want to do this on your kitchen table or even on your work table at home, because then it's going to be permanently marred. So you could use a stack of cardboard underneath. I just have some old plywood that I'm going to use as my cutting mat. Careful not to cut too far on that one. Okay, so now we got that cross, and if we make those relief cuts that I was talking about a minute ago, cutting through just the top layer, or at most halfway through, but not cutting all the way to the bottom, we're going to allow the material to fold nice and cleanly. Oh, looks like I missed one. There it is. Okay. There. See, pretty close to a cube. Now if you take a piece of tape, and all your adjoining pieces, put some tape. Sometimes they want to move on you a little bit. But what I'll show you in a minute is that this is actually a little easier than one of the other methods. And we can be a little bit loose with how we apply our tape here, because the finished surface is going to be covered. But there, very quickly, you've got a cube. Okay. Now, if we take something that's not a regular shape or form, such as say something like this. This is one of the profiles of the pieces that I want to work on. It would be mind-wrecking to try and figure out, okay, how does this unfold? What are its measurements? So we don't have to necessarily do this method where you have to measure and do relief cuts, although it's simpler to construct. Depends upon the form that you're trying to put together. So if we take our profile of our form and I duplicated it, so we've got two parts, the front and the back, or the two sides, whichever direction you're looking at it. And I've got some pieces of cardboard already cut here to width. I can come in, take a piece of tape on there, tape around there, come in with another piece of tape. You can see how our form is already starting to come together. Then we'll finish up the other sides by taking this piece here. I'm just going to eyeball where it goes up to right there. So you can see it moves around on you a bit, so you just have to have a plan on how you're going to make all your connections to get it to work with you instead of against you. So see there, that's really quickly coming together, and you can see this profile here has a curve. That's where we would come in and probably use a piece of the cardboard where we did the relief cuts to get it to match that curve. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Another way is to do a kind of combination of things here. Here, I have a triangle that I have two curves in here, concave curves. And then I've made a relief cut. So there I'm going to have a triangle, but it's going to have a more appealing visually to the side of it. And I'll take a piece of cardboard where I made a lot of relief cuts in. And all I did was I traced this piece around here to get that. So I didn't have to measure anything. I'm not spending time trying to figure out the exact geometry of what this form actually measures and the volume that it occupies. I'm relying on my perception of how much visual volume that it occupies. Now in your kit that you picked up for this class, you do have hot glue. You can use hot glue in this if you want, but please note I only gave you enough sticks for the project that it's intended for. So if you have hot glue sticks, you can do that. Regular Elmer's glue will take forever for this to dry on here, so tape is going to be your best friend on that. Okay, you'll notice there is no bottom. I don't really need a bottom for this form because that's how it's going to sit in the finished product. So if you're not going to see it in the finished form, don't put the work into that part, but if any of it is going to be visible, make sure that it is presentable and treated with the same amount of visual respect of the surface as the rest of the form. But if you're never going to see it, only you know that that's going to be there. Okay, that's this first video for how to manipulate the cardboard to create forms. Relief cuts can give you curves. It can give you folds so that you are making your form out of fewer pieces of cardboard, so it's easier to actually construct. You can make it out of flat shapes where you cut out the profiles of the different sides and then take them together. Just note that you're going to be holding a lot of pieces. It can be frustrating, but it is a little bit more free than trying to measure out to do relief cuts to make a simple geometric form. Remember that your form is supposed to be non-objective, so don't make it look like anything in particular. That doesn't mean you're stuck with strict, rigid geometric forms. You can make them a little bit more organic in nature. And also keep the main objective in mind. occupy a large volume, and look heavy.